One of my favorite things about consuming unhealthy amounts of media constantly is passionately sharing the things I enjoy with the people I love, and conversely hearing about the things that they love. Unfortunately, I'm always in a state of intense guilt whenever I talk someone's ear off about the things I'm passionate about, so I decided I'd just do it in a video instead, so when you inevitably get tired of listening to me speak, you don't feel obligated to smile and nod until I stop talking.
Spending too much time with the sad face. Focus on the trials and the bad fate. Focus in my mind, turn to ass space. Hope this in my last days.
You ever wonder why we get so attached to things? When you think about it, all this stuff we own is just screws and wires. Except sometimes it isn't.
Assemble with Care is a beautiful story about the significance between the seemingly insignificant objects that sit on our shelves and the memories and meanings that our mind associates with those things. Going into the game, the only thing I knew about it was that it involved repairing objects and that it had that distinctly cozy game vibe. What I didn't expect was a story that almost brought me to tears 2 different times. The gameplay loop of fixing objects doesn't have we were here levels of puzzle difficulty, but the levels are very logical, which made it satisfying to figure out the levels despite them not being that hard. It still has a couple levels, especially later on, where you do have to give things some thought, but I found that I was trading those aha moments found in other puzzle games for a sense of gratification for logically putting things together. I'm pretty sure Final Fantasy XIII is the most derisive game in the main series of Final Fantasies. I can understand why it became that way, because it gives off a very rough edge first impression. Some of the characters begin pretty terribly, not as characters, but as people. Lightning is closed off emotionally, and Snow's pompous, casual, carefree attitude in a war-torn district makes him feel very immature and arrogant. Saz is perfect. He has a chocobo in his afro, and that is freaking dope, dude. The game is very linear. I've seen people say that the story is confusing and that the combat is bad. Now let me tell you why shut up, you're wrong. The majority of the game is linear. That's objective. It branches out a little more than halfway through the game, but I personally didn't mind that at all. You can decide for yourself if that matters to you ultimately. Every time I heard someone use the word hero, I'd roll my eyes into the back of my skull.
These people need heroes.
We are the heroes after all.
Heroes don't run from fights.
Hero.
Hero.
Is that my hero?
By the end of the game, I was still rolling my eyes, but it was more of that way where you roll your eyes when your closest friend makes humanity's worst pun, and then you're like, hey dude, can you shut up or I'll staple your mouth shut? But in reality, you'd curb stomp anyone teeth first who messed with your friend because you love them. All that to say, the appeal of the characters is how they grow and they change throughout the course of the game. Their perception of the world and themselves is constantly challenged. Snow's ignorance and lack of concerted reflection reaches a boiling point when it causes an unforeseen conflict he could not have predicted. Lightning's inability to respond emotionally is brought to the forefront as her coping mechanism harms the people around her. They try to fix their flaws, correct their mistakes, and work to understand themselves and others. And as someone who's always trying to better myself and be the best possible version of me I can be, it resonated with me. Having one of the biggest elements of a story, the characters, be in some cases so annoying is a very brazen choice for a game, and if they didn't change at all during the game, I would not love them like I do now. But it's where things end up that makes them so incredible.
What are you up to? Hey!
The story starts in an unfamiliar place with unfamiliar characters, using unfamiliar terms, and drip feeds you information very slowly. Your first time hearing terms will only be understood conceptually, and I believe that's intentional. The tense and the reactions given will make it clear that being a lessee is bad. You won't fully understand what that means and all its implications until you give it time. The fact things aren't spelled out in their entirety is not arbitrarily chosen to be the game's storytelling method. It's a reflection of the game story onto the player themselves. I can't really elaborate on that point without spoiling things, so you'll have to take my word for it. Or maybe I'm lying, and I know you'll never play the game anyway, so I'm just lying. The combat system follows a very similar path. It starts out slow and gives you incremental additions. As you acquire new abilities and roles, then learn how to use the paradigm system, things start to get more involved. There are moments through the game where they'll test you and push you to understand the nuance of paradigms, what pages to build, what the best time is to change pages, and what setups are strongest depending on the current situation. It is so gratifying to beat a monster that just handed your ass to you by meticulously constructing everything to counter it completely. Final Fantasy XIII slowly pushes you to understand both its mechanics and its world, and it does take a while to get there, but if you take things slow and let the game introduce things at its pace, you might be pleasantly surprised. If you're a completionist that enjoys a challenge, the game will pull no punches and steal your charity money. Warning in advance, if you 100% the game, write down every accessory and weapon you pick up. Check them off as you confirm you have them. Do not sell anything. You will thank me later. Unless you do not play the game, then you will not thank me later. I still can't believe how much game is in this game. Divinity 2 has so much depth that I could have still had things spoiled for me after completing my first campaign, which was over 100 hours. And I want to stress that I'm not just talking about like some small little things that I could have missed. I'm talking about full game-long stories. The adventure begins in the character customization. There are 6 core characters, as well as custom characters if that's more your jam. But at the time of recording this, I've done multiple playthroughs and have played every core character, and they're all fantastic. Not in terms of personality. The Red Prince is kind of a dickling. I find most games that try to do personality are very surface level. For example, I think of something like Saints Row 3, where there is a personality tab, but it's not all that deep. Not that Saints Row is a great example of a deep game, it's just what came to mind. But Divinity uses a tag system to make the personality side a little more interesting. Admittedly, I'm not sure if tags are a common appearance in this style of game. This was my first time experiencing the tag system, and I thought it was a really great way to add depth to a character. Tags give your character specific dialogue options that won't appear without the tag, which isn't just delivering a line with a bit of a different personality-based flair. It can be the sort of thing that will lead you into fights or get yourself out of threatening situations. After character creation, the story begins with your character, open parentheses S, close parentheses, being detained and sent to the island of Fort Joy. I don't want to speak to the story too much. There are constant moving plot threads with the game allowing things to unfold at a healthy pace, and so many different substantial things are happening, even in the side quests. I thought I was so thorough in my first playthrough, but I was still floored at the new things I saw, particularly the things that happen irregardless of the character you're playing. The combat is fun and variable, especially as the game goes on and you have action bars full of different moves. My first ever playthrough was on the classic difficulty, which I think was a good call, because this was my first time playing a CRPG like this. So being able to play on classic and have the game introduce things and understand stuff was great for preventing me from being overwhelmed. I've also since done a tactician playthrough, and I highly recommend, if you're already familiar with the core concepts of a CRPG, to give it a go. It turns up the difficulty, of course, which incentivizes being a little more methodical and slow, if that's your jam, really taking things in, and considering the moves and actions your allies and enemies can take. On the other side of the coin, if you're not the type of person who has a lot of time to play games, you might not be interested in something like Divinity 2. Although I see the depth and length, don't be gross, as a definitive positive, people with less time or who prefer shorter experiences might not be drawn to something like this. If you're not the type who likes to sit through dialogue and take in a world, this might not be your style. Not to say that no fun can be had if you're not that type of player, but just that your enjoyment might fade a little quicker once throwing a fireball at a group of townspeople isn't funny anymore. There's so much to say that I could not possibly cover everything, so here's some random cliff notes. Elemental effects react with each other, which adds another level of dynamism to combat. The game has 2-player local co-op and 4-player online co-op, so if you got a gaggle of nerds you want to game with, gaggle away. It smells worse over here than a dozen rotten eggs dropped in a vat of vinegar. You can pick your instrument during character creation and it'll change some of the music in the game. And because I am anticipating someone potentially wondering what I thought about Baldur's Gate 3 after gushing about Divinity 2, I was late to the party, so I didn't finish my playthrough before the end of 2023. But I'll just go ahead and spoil next year's video. It's gonna be in there. Going next. Where are you? You're going next? Come here. I can't kill you. Blunt Scuncture?
These horrible fucking names.
I won't spend much time selling you on either Vampire Survivors or Stardew Valley. It's pretty likely that you're familiar with these games and know if you're interested. Worst case, you're not familiar and this small segment could incentivize you to watch a review from someone who covered the games in more detail, or play them for yourself. Just know, I wholeheartedly recommend both games and I consider them 10 out of 10 experiences. The reason I'm sticking them together in this segment is because both of these games do something that keeps you hooked as soon as you start playing them. They just keep giving. From the beginning of the games, you are constantly enumerated with mechanics and gameplay options that continues on much longer than I ever would have expected. In both Stardew Valley and Vampire Survivors, I would hit points where I'd feel that I was completely satisfied with my playthrough. I was happy with what I had experienced, and I felt I got more than my money's worth and was ready to finish up. Then I would just keep finding new things to do. Or more specifically in Vampire Survivors' case, the game would just keep releasing more stuff to do. I was constantly floored that I was getting to experience more and more of these amazing games, which became more exponential as I had already considered them amazing experiences. That is a very surface level review of one element that these games share that was a big highlight in my mind. There's a lot more to love about each game individually, and I truly could go on about both of them for hours. I originally planned to only talk about the albums I loved the most this year, but I came to a realization that if I did that, then I would be missing out on mentioning a lot of really amazing, just individual songs. So before we get into the albums, here is a big, hard to follow, genre whiplash cacophony of songs I really enjoyed in 2023. There is no chance I didn't forget some. Pray to God for Your Mother, Holy Ghost Spirit, Die Another Day, One Man's Cringe, Pop Off, For the Jeers, Cream of the Crop, Synergy, and Ember from the Jackpot Juicer album by Dance Gavin Dance. I would have just talked about the entire album, but that was only about half the songs on it. I just didn't finish it before the end of the year, but I did absolutely love what I heard. Also, still Dance Gavin Dance, but not part of that album, was The Ghost of Billy Royalton, which is a beautiful song, honoring their late bassist. Chill Kill and Milky Way by Red Velvet. There's the whiplash I was talking about. Lost, Bad Habits, and Kingslayer by Bring Me the Horizon. Boca by Dreamcatcher. Burn the Sails by Airplane Mode featuring Thomas Frank. Yes, the same Thomas Frank that makes the highly curated life advice videos. He also has vocals. Madeline and Ground by Good Kid. Waiting on the Sky to Change by Starset featuring Breaking Benjamin. Will I Make It and Bump That by Youngtown. This Was a Terrible Idea by Me. Drown With Me, Never Letting Go, and Death of the King by Falcon Shield. Magnolia and the Man Himself by Gang of Youths. Demonetized Again. Garden State by Census Fail. Jump High by Lion Babe. Don't Lose Sight and Freckles by Lawrence. Vertigo, Elevated Being, and No Place Like Home by Valiant Hearts. Utena by Riol. I don't think I said either of those words correctly. And finally, High Ren by Ren. The song is not called High Ren by Ren. The song is High Ren by Ren. That felt impossible to follow recording it, so I can't imagine how it comes together in editing.
Wish I was a stone, so I couldn't feel. You'd yell in my face, it'd be no big deal.
AJR is such a distinct group. They explore topics from unique angles and will pull from any aspects of life, from the comfort of not conforming for other sakes, to the melancholy of moving away from home, into the grief of loss. That's not just reflected in the lyrics. The sounds they utilize in their songs reflect their ability to fuse their unique and authentic selves with the music they create. They have songs where the main sound is someone knocking on a door to a baby crying. For once, I was actually on time for the release of something, and I've been listening to the album routinely since it's dropped, and I love it. Based on the interviews I've seen, it seems like it was an incredibly difficult album to put together. I respect that through it all, they still released a product worthy of being proud of. It's not only the songs in the album that give it so much weight and value to me, but the messages surrounding the album are very inspiring to me and have helped to ease some fears that my anxiety-addled mind deals with. All the songs on the Maybe Man have a distinct sound. Some of them have multiple distinct sounds. Within one song, it can go from
Cause then I could practice not being me
to The Maybe Man is more than just incredible music. It's a brutally honest reflection from people who've experienced life and transformed those experiences into art. Even if I didn't love every song on the album, the story behind the album would still be worthy of my respect. Slippery People is an album that perfectly reflected some of the things that are constantly bouncing around in my head. There's a motif running throughout the album that reminded me of the feeling I get as someone who has generalized anxiety disorder. It's like the instrumentals are made from that constant low hum of anxiety. In this case, being reflective of the corrupt parts of the world and feeling as an individual powerless to do anything about it.
This album is more about like an external view on how there's like this observation that I've noticed that there are a lot of manipulative structures that are all pretty similar in our world, that operate in similar ways economically, politically, and on a personal basis, and like how they manipulate people through their empathy. And so that's kind of the basis of this.
I'm a very secluded person, and I have been for a very long time. It's the sort of thing that drastically shifts your view of the outside world. I do try to maintain an equilibrium and not exclusively focus on the negatives, but without experiencing things firsthand, it's kind of impossible to not feel biased in a direction, especially as humans have a tendency to focus on the negative. This album was a needed reminder that people aren't as complicit in a corrupt world as my biases would have me believe. There are people who are aware and are willing to push back against the abuse in whatever little ways they can, and that really eases my anxiety every time I listen to these songs. I always love seeing authentically and passionately charged songs crafted by a group of talented musicians, but the delivery of the subject matter transcended it past just beautiful songs. Slippery People to me is now a reminder to be mindful about the people in the world that try to do good, and to hold on to that thought when it feels like my brain just wants to tell me otherwise.
Look, finger grips getting stronger. I will suffer no longer. Holding on to my conscience is more important than your honor. Free from awful toxic themes that orbit y'all's philosophies. Free from siphoning off a dream, no thoughts of reciprocity. Free from holding on to bitter seeds till every thought is in the weeds. Lost within infinity, the countless possibilities. You don't think it's fishy that the people with the power are the same ones that keep telling you that they deserve the tower and you're just like them. But you're not quite them. If you could just learn to be less like you, then you might just get to be more like you. What? No, that's sorry, cool.
There's a powerful group of people out there that are secretly running the world. I'm talking about the guys no one knows about, the guys that are invisible. The top 1% of the top 1%, the guys that play God without permission. And now I think they're following me.
I watched Mr. Robot originally more than 5 years ago. At the time, the show wasn't complete, ending at season 3, and I loved it. A few years later, I watched the show in its entirety, and there were details that I had taken in on my first watch that were completely shifted this time around. There are so many twists and changes that were imperceptible until the show was shattering the walls it just spent so much time building. I started rewatching it again in 2023, and I was still spotting new details. This was a show I had already loved, but every new thing I spotted made my respect for the show and everyone who had a hand in creating it even deeper. The show primarily follows Elliot. He is a socially awkward morphine addict trying to make the world a better place in the best way he knows how.
This, the thrill of pawning a system. This is the greatest rush. God access. The feeling never gets old.
Mr. Robot is in a constant state of juggling different topics, but it never comes close to dropping the ball. Vices, corruption, trauma, grief, manipulation, insecurity and shame, hope, addiction, mental health, narcissism, self-acceptance, guilt, loneliness, personal meaning, sacrifice, control. The ability to weave all these things together and still create a compelling narrative that doesn't get confused blows me away. It's absolutely incredible. There's more to say. There's much, much, much more to say, but I can't put a show this dense into proper perspective in a video like this. So I guess you'll just have to go watch the whole thing. I've never had any strong feelings about the romance genre, but it was never something I actively engaged with much. Bridgerton gave me a deeper appreciation for the appeal of the genre and what it can provide. The thing I appreciated the most about Bridgerton is the unabashedly earnest depictions of love. It doesn't shy away from the strains that come along with loving someone. It leans into those things to craft a compelling story. The weight of grief, the fear and dismay caused by erratic mental health, childhood trauma and the tolls it takes in adulthood, and the natural reluctance to engage with the painful things that come with the most beautiful parts of life. I am also including the spin-off show Queen Charlotte when I say all this. It's the same world, with more of a focus on the Queen's story and not nearly enough focus on who styles her weird big hair. The hair is insane. There are a lot of plot threads and interconnected narratives beyond the romantic angle as well. They extend that same level of authenticity to every other element of the show, but it ultimately follows this overarching motif of what it means to truly and deeply love and be loved. Big props to all the women in the show because those corsets look very painful. I couldn't stop thinking about how much that looks like it hurts. I don't really know what makes a poetry book good. I don't even know what makes a non-poetry book good. I'm one of those I really like reading, but I never actually read type people. Despite that, I did get into one book over 2023 that I really loved. Egghead, or You Can't Survive on Ideas Alone by Bo Burnham.
I dare you to step up to me in the street. Try me. Try me! Step up, you fucking pussy!
This book was extremely impressive to me. It takes what I feel like are thoughts on thoughts and turns them into something copacetic, entertaining, interesting, and thought-provoking. It's so cool, especially as someone who has a mess of different thoughts on different levels swirling around in my head constantly. It made me feel that maybe this constant barrage of incongruent thoughts and feelings isn't such a bad thing if I take the time to learn how to wade through it all. The writing is that hodgepodge of thoughts combined with Bo's comedy style, poignantly reflected by the strange and trippy art drawn by Chance Bone. If your interest is piqued, I linked some free preview pages in the description, so you can give those a read to see if you vibe with it. The description will be a compendium of as much relevant information as I can find, and I also would like to just throw it out there that I would love to hear from you. You know, the same format. What do you like? If you make videos, feel free to copy and paste the entire damn idea. Not that it's all that original, but I just like listening to people talk about the stuff they really like and the reasons it resonated with them. I want just more of that instead of YouTube clickbait BS and lying to people for attention. I just want to talk about cool stuff. Feels kind of weird to say this now considering how late this video is going to end up being, but I hope your 2024 has been good and continues to be good. And if not, I hope you can find the strength to move forward. Just putting the pieces together, figuring things out and trying to get out there. And it's hard, but I believe in you. Unless you suck, then I do not. Fuck you. I can't use that.
Spending too much time with the sad face. Focus on the trials and the bad fate, yeah. Pockets in my mind turn to ass space. Hope this ain't my last day.